The space station, called Harmony Prime, floated in the empty space between three great empires. It belonged to no one end. Everyone at the same time. For 200 years it had served as neutral ground, where species who might otherwise fight each other could meet, talk, and learn. At its heart stood the Galactic Academy of Inter-Species Relations, the most famous school in known space. Students came from dozens of worlds to study here. They learned diplomacy, trade, history, and the delicate art of understanding creatures completely different from themselves. Graduation from the academy opened doors to the highest positions in galactic government. Competition for admission was fierce, and only the best from each species earned a place. This year, for the first time in the Academy's long history, humans had been admitted. There were only 3 of them. The Galactic Council had debated for years before allowing even this small number. Humanity was still considered a young species, having discovered faster than light travel only 2 centuries ago. Many council members felt humans needed another few centuries of development before they were ready to participate in galactic affairs. Others argued that the humans had proven surprisingly capable in their short time among the stars, and that early inclusion might help guide their development in positive directions. In the end, 3 spots were offered. Thousands of humans applied. The selection process took 2 years. Marcus Chen was 34 years old. He had served 15 years in Earth's unified defense force before retiring to pursue diplomatic studies. His file described him as calm, observant, and patient. What the file did not mention was that he had seen combat on 3 different worlds. During border disputes with Acrian Confederacy, he had learned to read dangerous situations the way other people read books. Priya Sharma was 28. She held advanced degrees in Zen linguistics from 3 universities and could speak 11 alien languages fluently. She had a sharp tongue and a sharper mind. The selection committee had worried she might be too confrontational for diplomatic work. Her supporters argued that sometimes diplomacy required someone willing to speak uncomfortable truths. David Okonkwo was the youngest. At 25, he stood nearly 2 m tall and weighed over 100 kg, most of it muscle. Despite his intimidating size, everyone who knew him described him as gentle and kind. He was studying xenobiology because he wanted to understand life in all its forms. He believed that understanding led to compassion, and compassion was what the galaxy needed most. The 3 humans arrived at Harmony Prime on a cold morning in the station's artificial calendar. They stepped off their transport ship into a docking bay filled with beings of every shape and size. Some walked on 2 legs, like humans. Others moved on for 6 or 8. A few floated through the air on gas-filled bladders or slithered along the floor. The air smelled of 100 different worlds mixed together. A tall, thin being with blue skin and 4 eyes met them at the gate. She introduced herself as Administrator VTH Kara and welcomed them to the academy in a voice that clicked and hummed. She explained that they would be treated exactly like any other students, no special treatment, no exceptions. They would succeed or fail on their own merits. Marcus thanked her politely and asked where they could find their quarters. VTH Kara's 4 eyes blinked in a pattern that might have been surprise. You do not have questions about the rules, she asked. The schedule, the expectations. We read all the materials you sent. Priya said 3 times each. We have questions, but they can wait until we understand the academy better through experience. Another blink pattern, this one harder to read. Practical bait Kura said very well. Follow the guide drone to your quarters. Orientation begins tomorrow at first bell. A small floating sphere lit up and drifted away from the wall. The 3 humans picked up their bags and followed it into the station. Their quarters were small but comfortable. Each had their own sleeping room connected to a shared common area. The furniture could be adjusted to fit different body types, and the environmental controls allowed them to set temperature, humidity, and air composition to match Earth standards. Window looked out over the station's central garden where plants from 100 worlds grew together under artificial sunlight. David sat down his bag and looked out the window. It's beautiful, he said. It's political, Marcus replied, unpacking his things with military precision. A garden where everything grows together. The message is obvious. Priya sat down and began reviewing information on her tablet. Current class has 47 students from 31 species. We're the only humans. The largest group is the Mellery with 6 students, followed by the Krillians with 5. Any? Marcus asked. Priya's expression tightened. One a noble son named Krathva. David turned from the window. That could be a problem. The VRX were one of the great powers of the galaxy. Their empire spanned 400 worlds. Built through conquest over 10,000 years, they were large, powerful predators who had evolved on a harsh world of jungles and mountains. Their culture valued strength above all other qualities. The weak existed to serve the strong. This was not considered cruel in Verarak society. It was simply the natural order of things. Relations between the Verax Empire and the human Federation were cold but not hostile. The Verax had tested human defenses twice in the past century, sending small fleets to probe the borders. Both times the humans had driven them back with surprising effectiveness. The Verac had expected easy conquest. They found something else entirely. Since then the 2 powers had maintained a careful distance. The Verax did not understand humans. They were small, soft creatures who should have been easy prey, yet somehow they had built a civilization that could match Verax military strength. This contradiction bothered the Verax deeply. They were waiting to see if humanity would prove to be true predators worthy of respect or merely prey that had gotten lucky. We stay calm, Marcus said. We observe. We don't start anything, but we don't back down either. Priya nodded. Agreed. We're representing our entire species here. Everything we do will be analyzed and remembered. David looked back out the window at the garden. I hope we can just learn and make friends. That's what we came here for. Hope for the best, Marcus said quietly. Prepare for the worst. Orientation began the next morning. The students gathered in a large amphitheater with seats arranged in circles around a central stage. Each species sat in a group with their own kind, a habit that the instructors tried to discourage but never quite eliminated. The 3 humans sat together near the middle of the room. Marker scanned the crowd with practiced eyes, identifying species, noting body language, marking potential trouble. Priya listened to conversations in 6 different languages happening around them, gathering information. David smiled at anyone who looked their way. hoping to make a friendly impression. The Varric sat alone at the top of the amphitheater. Krath was impossible to miss. He stood nearly 3 m tall when not slouching in his seat. His scales were dark red, almost black, and his eyes glowed with a faint orange light. Powerful muscles bunched beneath his hide. Long claws tipped each of his 4 fingers. He was watching the humans. When Marcus met his gaze, Krath bared his teeth in what might have been a smile or a threat. Among Varrics there was often little difference. Administrator VTHKar stepped onto the central stage and began the welcoming speech. She spoke of cooperation, understanding, and the shared future of all galactic species. She explained the rules of the Academy: no violence, no threats. Disputes would be resolved through proper channels. Students who could not follow these rules would be expelled. Marcus noticed that VTHKar's 4 eyes flicked toward Crafter several times during this part of the speech. After orientation, the students began moving toward their first classes. Marcus and his companions found themselves walking near a group of Mallory, small furry beings about 1 meter tall with large ears and gentle eyes. They came from a peaceful world with no predators and had no natural defenses. In a galaxy full of larger, stronger species, they survived through intelligence, diplomacy, and by making themselves useful to everyone. One young Mallory was struggling with a heavy bag that had slipped from her shoulder. David immediately bent down to help her. "Let me carry that for you," he said. Gently, the Mallory looked up at him. With wide eyes, she seemed frozen with fear. David realized that to her he must look like a giant redditor offering assistance. His size, his forward facing eyes, his visible muscles, all of these said danger in the language of prey species. He knelt down to make himself smaller and spoke softly. "I'm David. I'm from Earth. When you hear your bag looked heavy, and I thought maybe I could help." The young Mior's ears twitched. She looked at her companions, who watched with nervous expressions. Then she looked back at David. "I am Tyvan," she said in a small voice. "Thank you. The bag is very heavy." David carefully lifted the bag and walked alongside the Mallory group. He asked Tivan about her home world, her studies, her interests. By the time they reached their first class, she was chatting happily about her love of mathematics and her dream of becoming a trade negotiator. Marcus and Priya followed behind watching. The weeks that followed fell into a pattern. Classes continued as scheduled. Students studied, attended lectures, complete assignments. On the surface, the Galactic Academy functioned as it always had, but beneath that surface something dark was growing. Krath tested the boundaries every day. He started small. A harsh word here, a shove there. He would block doorways, forcing smaller students to squeeze past his massive frame or wait until he chose to move. He spoke over instructors during lessons, challenging their authority with questions that were really statements of contempt. The instructors responded with warnings, formal warnings delivered in official language, entered into records, and then ignored. The Varax Empire was too powerful to offend over what could be dismissed as youthful arrogance. Cranther's father sat on the Galactic Council's military committee. His family controlled trade routes worth billions of credits. A student's hurt feelings weighed nothing against such political mass, so the warnings accumulated and nothing changed. Marcus kept a record Every incident, every date, every witness, he wrote it all down in a small notebook he carried everywhere. When Priya asked why, he explained because memory fades and people lie. Documentation is truth that doesn't change when the time comes. We'll need proof. Priya began collecting her own data. She listened to conversations, hallways and dining areas. She noted which students had been targeted, what had been said, how the victims had responded. She built a map of Crafther's behavior, looking for patterns. David took a different approach. He spent his time with the students who had been hurt. He sat with them at meals. He helped them with their studies. He listened when they needed to talk. He never promised to fix anything or offered advice. He simply made sure they knew they were not alone. Mallory attached themselves to David with particular intensity. They were the most vulnerable students in the academy, and they knew it. Kraft had singled them out for special attention. He called them food animals. He made jokes about hunting seasons. He described in graphic detail what Vera's ancestors had done to species like the Mallory during the conquest wars. Tivon, the young Mallory that David had helped on the first day, grew quieter with each passing week. She stopped chatting about mathematics. She stopped dreaming out loud about her future. She just tried to survive each day without attracting attention. David watched this transformation with growing anger, but he did not act, not yet. The three humans had agreed to wait for the right moment. Random intervention would accomplish nothing except making them targets themselves. One evening, Marcus called a meeting in their quarters. He spread his notebook on the table between them. 47 documented incidents in 6 weeks. He said 12 formal warnings from the administration, 0 consequences. Priya added her own notes. The pattern is clear. He's escalating. Each incident is slightly worse than the last. He's testing how far he can go, and the administration keeps failing the test. David said bitterly, they're supposed to protect students. That's their job. They're protecting the academy's political position. Marcus replied, to them, we're temporary. We come and go. But the relationship with the Verax Empire lasts for generations. They made a calculation, a wrong calculation. Priya said, maybe, but it's not our calculation to make. We're students here, not administrators. If we go to war with Kraft without proper cause, we become the problem. David leaned forward. So what's proper cause? How bad does it have to get? Marcus was quiet for a moment. We'll know it when we see it. Right now he's being cruel. But careful, he hasn't crossed the line into actual violence. The moment he does, everything changes. And if he hurts someone badly before we act, David asked, then we act. But we have to be ready. We have to know exactly what we're going to do and why. This isn't about revenge or anger. It's about changing the situation permanently. They talked late into the night, planning for possibilities they hoped would never happen. The next week brought a change in Krafther's behavior. He had noticed the humans. More specifically, he had noticed that they were not afraid of him. Every other student in the academy showed some reaction to his presence. They flinched, looked away, hurried to get out of his path. Their fear fed him, confirmed his belief in the natural order of predator and prey. The humans did none of these things. They watched him with calm, steady eyes. They moved aside when he passed, but without hurrying, without fear. They treated him as they would treat any other student. Nothing more and nothing less. This bothered Kara. He began making comments about humans during classes. He questioned their right to be at the academy. He suggested that their admission was a political favor, not a recognition of merit. He implied that humans were barely more advanced than prey, animals themselves clever perhaps, but still fundamentally weak. The humans did not respond to any of it. Other students watched these exchanges with fascination. They had never seen anyone ignore a Verax so completely. Some wondered if the humans were brave or simply stupid. Others began to wonder if there was something the humans knew that everyone else did not. Kara's frustration grew. He was used to being feared. Fear was his native language, the currency of his power. These humans refused to pay, and he did not know what to do about it. He could not simply attack them. Even Verax honor codes had rules about starting fights with those who had given no offense, and they, humans, were careful to give no offense. They were polite, quiet, respectful of rules. They made it impossible for him to justify action against them, so he turned his attention to easier targets. The incident happened during a group simulation exercise. Students were divided into teams and given a fictional diplomatic crisis to resolve. They had to work together, combining their different perspectives and skills to find a solution. It was one of the Academy's core training exercises. Tevin's team had drawn a difficult scenario. Their fictional nations were on the brink of war and the causes ran deep. She was doing her best to analyze the economic factors. When Kra wandered over from his own team station, he stood over her, blocking the light. "What is the prey animal doing?" he asked in a voice that carried across the room. "Playing it being important." Tevin's hands trembled. She tried to focus on her work. "Look at me when I speak to you," Kratha said. His voice was still casual, almost friendly. The threat was, and the tone beneath the words. Tivon looked up. Her large eyes were wet with tears she was fighting to hold back. "Better," Karathra said. "Now let me explain something. Your species exists because mine allows it. Long ago they Verax hunted creatures like you for sport. We still could remember that when you play your little games of diplomacy." The instructor, an elderly being from a species known for their neutrality, cleared their throat. "Krath, please return to your own team." Krath ignored the instruction. He leaned closer to Tyan. "Perhaps you need a reminder of the natural order. Perhaps all the prey animals in this room need a reminder." "Krath, this is your second warning," the instructor said, voice wavering. "Warnings?" Krath laughed. "Your warnings mean nothing. You are weak. Your academy is weak. Your rules only exist because the Verax choose to tolerate them." He raised one clawed hand. The claws were long and sharp, designed for killing. He extended them toward Tivian's face, not quite touching, but close enough that she could feel the movement of air. "I wonder how long it would take prey animals to remember their fear," he said softly. "Shall we find out?" The room had gone silent. Every student watched. The instructor stood frozen, caught between duty and political terror. Time seemed to slow. Then 3 chairs scraped against the floor. Marcus, Priya, and David stood up together. There was no signal, no whispered agreement. They simply moved at the same moment, as if controlled by a single will. They did not run. They did not shout. They walked forward at an even pace, their footsteps the only sound in the silent room. Their faces showed no anger, no fear, nothing but calm determination. Krath turned to face them, his orange eyes widened slightly with surprise, then narrowed with interest, finally a reaction. Finally, something worth his attention. The humans stopped between him and Tyven. They stood in a line, shoulder to shoulder, forming a wall of flesh and bone in quiet resolve. Marcus spoke first. His voice was level and clear. Step away from the student, Krath. Bet his teeth, or what, little human? What will you do? We'll stay exactly where we are, Marcus replied, between you and her for as long as necessary. I could kill all three of you before anyone could stop me, Krathra said. You are small, you are weak, you have no claws, no fangs, no armor. What makes you think you can challenge me? David answered this time. His voice was gentle but firm. We're not challenging you. We're protecting her. There's a difference. Protection requires power. Krath said. You have none, Priya spoke. For the first time, power isn't just about who can kill whom, it's about who refuses to stand aside. Right now we refuse. Kraravor stared at them. In his entire life, no prey species had ever simply refused him. They begged, they ran, they submitted. They did not form lines and speak calmly about refusal. You are either very brave or very stupid, he said slowly. Probably both, Marcus replied, but here we are and here we stay. For a long moment no one moved. The room remained frozen. Destiny bathed. Next 3 days passed in tense silence. Kranther attended classes but said nothing. He did not threaten anyone. He did not make comments about prey species. He simply watched, his orange eyes following the humans wherever they went. The other students noticed the change. Conversations stopped when the humans entered rooms. Glances were exchanged, whispered. Theories spread through the academy like ripples in water. Some believed they humans had made a terrible mistake. They had challenged Avarax and survived only because Krava had chosen to show mercy. Next time there would be no mercy. The humans had painted targets on their backs. Others believed something else. They had watched the humans stand there, ground, without weapons, without threats, without visible fear. They had watched Avarax back down. This had never happened before in the academy's history. It should not have been possible, and yet it was. The Mallory were the most affected. Tivan and her companions began sitting with the humans at every meal. They followed David through the corridors. They studied in the same rooms, slept with their doors facing human quarters. They had found protectors and they clung to that safety. With desperate hope, David accepted this responsibility without complaint. He helped them with their work. He walked them to classes. He never made them feel like burdens. To him they were simply friends who needed support. Priya worried about the situation. We can't be their permanent guardians, she said during a late-night discussion. What happens when we graduate? What happens if we're not there when Crawford decides to finish what he started? We teach them, Marcus replied, not fighting. They're not built for that, but courage can be learned. They need to see that standing together works. Does it work? David asked quietly. Krathra backed down once. That doesn't mean he'll back down again. If anything, we've hurt his pride. He might feel he has something to prove now. Marcus nodded slowly. That's the risk. We bought time. We changed the situation, but we haven't solved the Problem Crather is still here. His beliefs haven't changed. Eventually, he'll act, so what do? We prepare, we document, and when he moves, we move to. The moment came sooner than any of them expected. A major examination was scheduled for the end of the week. It was the Academy's most important assessment of first-year students. Teams would be judged on their ability to solve a complex diplomatic crisis. Performance in this examination affected class rankings, future opportunities, and career prospects. Everyone was under pressure. Krath's team had been struggling. The examination required cooperation, compromise, and creative thinking. These were not Varek's strengths. His teammates were afraid to disagree with him, and he was unwilling to consider strategies that did not involve intimidation or shows of force. Their practice sessions had been disasters. On the evening before the examination, Crowder approached the humans in the dining hall. He did not sit. He stood over their table, arms folded, staring down at them. I have been thinking about your performance in class, he said without preamble. You will help my team prepare for tomorrow's examination. It was not a request. It was a demand. Marcus looked up calmly. Why would we do that? Because I am telling you to. That's not how this works, Priya said. We're not your servant. Krath's eyes flashed. You are whatever I decide you are. Tomorrow, your pet Mallory will be in the examination room with the rest of us. No instructors can stop me there. If you want her to survive the day, you will do what I say. The dining hall had gone quiet. Other students pretended not to watch, but everyone was listening. David's hands clenched under the table, but his voice stayed calm. You are threatening to hurt an innocent person because you can't pass a test on your own. I'm offering you a choice, Crafter replied. Help me and your little friend stay safe, Refuse, and I will teach this entire academy what happens to prey that forgets its place. Marcus stood slowly. He was considerably shorter than Krath, but he met the alien's gaze without flinching. No, he said simply. No. Kraver seemed genuinely surprised. You would sacrifice the Mallory for your pride? I'm not sacrificing anyone. You are making a choice to threaten an innocent student. That choice belongs to you. We're not going to help you succeed through intimidation. If you hurt someone tomorrow, that's your action, your responsibility, your consequence. There will be no consequences. Krath laughed. There never are. Not for me. Maybe not from the academy. Marcus agreed, but there are always consequences. They just take different forms. Crathro stared at him for a long moment, then he turned and walked away without another word. That night the humans did not sleep. They sat together in their common room, talking through possibilities, preparing for every scenario they could imagine. Priya sent encrypted messages to Earth's diplomatic office, providing detailed documentation of every incident and explaining what they expected would happen the next day. David sat with Tyan and the other Mallory, trying to calm their terror. Marcus sat alone by the window, looking out at the stars. It was calculating distances, angles, timing. How fast could Krath remove? How quickly could they respond? What were the gaps in the examination room's layout? Where should they position themselves? He had been in combat before. He knew the feeling that came before violence, the strange calm that settled over everything. He felt it. Now, the examination began at midday. 20 teams took their places in a large Simulation hall. Each team had their own station with displays, communication, equipment and space to work. The crisis they needed to solve involved a trade dispute threatening to spark a war between three fictional nations. They would be judged on creativity, cooperation, and effectiveness. Humans watched Caraver's position carefully. He was on the far side of the room. His team started work on the simulation, but he kept glancing in other directions. He was waiting for something. 2 hours into the examination, one of the smaller Krillian students made a mistake. She accidentally bumped Krathva while walking between stations. It was clearly an accident. She immediately apologized, her scales flushing with embarrassment. Krath grabbed her arm. The Krillian squealed in pain as his claws dug into her scales. Watch where you walk, little one, he hissed, or I will teach you to watch. The instructor proctoring the examination stepped forward. Kara released the student immediately. For a moment Kraft held on. His eyes swept the room, finding the humans, finding T. He smiled, then he released the Krillian and held up his hands. An accident. I was simply helping her keep her balance. The instructor hesitated, then stepped back. The examination continued, but the atmosphere had changed. Everyone was tense, waiting for the explosion they knew was coming. Students made mistakes because they could not focus. Teams fell behind on their simulations. Fear hung in the air like smoke. The final hour of the examination began. Crafter's team was failing badly. They had made critical errors that could not be corrected in the time remaining. His teammates tried to salvage what they could, but it was hopeless. Kara stood up from his station. He did not bother with excuses or pretense. He simply walked across the room toward where the Mallory team was working. Tyan saw him coming. She froze, unable to move or speak. Her teammates tried to continue working, pretending they had not noticed, hoping against hope that the threat would pass them by. It did not. Kranther stopped in front of their station. He placed his massive hands on their workstation and leaned forward, blocking their displays. I told you there would be consequences, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. You did not help me. Now your little friends will pay the price. The instructor moved forward again, but Kara raised one clawed hand. Stay back, he growled. This is between creditor and prey. It is the natural order. You have tolerated my presence here and taken my family's money and enjoyed my empire and LT Unk and GT's protection. You will not interfere now. The instructor stopped. Other students looked away, unwilling to involve themselves. The room fell silent, except for the soft beeping of abandoned simulations. Krath extended his claws toward Tiven. I am going to hurt you now, he said calmly, not because you did anything wrong, but because your human friends need to learn that prey cannot protect prey. Only predators have power. Only the strong survive. Tiven closed her eyes. She was trembling so hard that her furs seemed to blur at the edges. Then she heard footsteps. Calm, steady footsteps, 3 sets. Moving in perfect unison. She opened her eyes. Marcus, Priya, and David walked across the examination hall. They moved without hurrying, without running. They approached as if they had all the time in the world, as if Kratha was a minor obstacle rather than a deadly threat. They stopped between the Vorax and the Miri again, just as before. 3 ordinary humans facing a creature twice their size with claws that could tear through steel. Crowther laughed. This. Again, you made your gesture last time. It changes nothing. I am going to go through you, and then I am going to hurt your friends who cannot stop me. All you can do is die first. Marcus nodded. Slowly. Probably you're faster and stronger. You could almost certainly kill all three of us before anyone could intervene. Then why stand there? Because killing us is not free, Marcus said. You might not. The aftermath of the examination hall confrontation swept through the academy like a storm. By evening, everyone knew what had happened. By the next morning, everyone had an opinion about it. Administrator Vikara summoned the three humans to her office. She sat behind a curved desk made of some dark material that seemed to absorb light. Her 4 eyes were impossible to read. You caused a scene, she said without preamble. You disrupted an official examination. You provoked a confrontation with a member of a powerful imperial family. Marcus stood at attention, hands behind his back. We prevented a violent assault on fellow students. That seems like the more relevant fact. Relevant to whom? Vither's voice was cold. The Varax embassy has filed a formal complaint. They claim you deliberately humiliated their representative. They are demanding your expulsion. Priya stepped forward. With respect, Administrator, we have documentation of 47 incidents of harassment, intimidation, and threats committed by Krath over the past 2 months. 12 of these resulted in formal warnings from your own staff. We also have evidence that he explicitly threatened to harm students during the examination if his demands were not met. Where did you obtain this documentation? We collected it ourselves, Priya replied. Dates, times, witnesses, direct quotes when available. We can provide copies to your office immediately. VTH Kara was silent for a moment. Her 4 eyes blinked in a complex pattern that Marcus could not interpret. You anticipated this, she said finally. You knew there would be a confrontation, and you prepared evidence to defend yourselves afterward. We hoped there would not be a confrontation, David said quietly, but we prepared for one because hope is not a strategy. The administrator leaned back in her chair. The Varax Empire is a powerful member of the Galactic Council. Their support is essential to this academy's continued operation. If I expel you, they will be satisfied and the matter will be closed. And if you don't, Marcus asked, if I don't, I will need to explain to the council why I am retaining 3 human students who have caused a diplomatic incident. She paused. Unless I have documentation proving that the incident was provoked by the virus student himself, in which case the diplomatic situation becomes considerably more complex. Priya reached into her bag and pulled out a data chip. She placed it on the administrator's desk. Everything we have, she said, organized chronologically with cross-references to the Academy's own warning records. We also included a legal analysis from Earth's diplomatic office suggesting that under galactic law, failure to protect students from known threats may constitute institutional negligence. Bethkara picked up the data chip and examined it. You contacted your government before this morning. We contacted them before the examination. We wanted them to be prepared in case something happened to us, and if Krath had killed you, Marcus shrugged, then our government would have the evidence needed to pursue the matter through appropriate channels, our deaths would have meant something. That was the best we could arrange under the circumstances. The administrator stared at them for a long time, then slowly she placed the data chip in a reader and began reviewing its contents. The humans waited in silence as she scrolled through incident after incident, warning after warning. When she finished, her expression had changed. It was still impossible to read completely, but something had shifted behind those four eyes. I have been the administrator of this academy for 37 years, she said slowly. In that time I have managed countless diplomatic situations. I have balanced the needs of dozens of species against each other. I have made compromises that I am not proud of, because they were necessary to maintain the greater peace. She stood and walked to her window, looking out at the garden, where plants from 100 worlds grew together. But I have never seen three students simply refuse to be afraid. I have never seen prey walk directly into the jaws of a predator and negotiate their survival through sheer determination. I did not think it was possible. She turned back to face them. The Varric's demand will be denied. Kraver will be placed on disciplinary probation. Any further incidents will result in his immediate expulsion, regardless of political consequences. This decision will be made public this afternoon. David stepped forward. What about Tivon and the other? They're still afraid. Probation doesn't mean they're safe. I will arrange for increased security during classes and examinations. I will also speak personally with the Mallory delegation to reassure them of the Academy's commitment to their safety. That's something Priya acknowledged, but security can't be everywhere. What happens in hallways, in dining areas, the spaces between official events? Bethgar nodded slowly. You are correct. Official measures have limits, but official measures are all I can provide. Anything beyond that must come from the students themselves. The humans exchanged glances. A silent understanding passed between them. Then, we and LT, Unc and GT, LL handle the rest ourselves. Marcus said. They left the administrator's office and walked in silence until they reached the central garden. It was quiet at this hour, the artificial sun dimming toward evening mode. They sat on a bench surrounded by alien flowers. That went better than expected, David said. She was looking for a way out, Marcus replied. We gave her one. The documentation changed the political calculation. Now the Varric's are the ones who have to explain their behavior, not us. Priya was already thinking ahead. Probation only protects against further official incidents. Krathva will adapt. He'll find ways to threaten people that don't leave evidence. We need to teach the others how to protect themselves. How? David asked. The Mallory aren't fighters. None of the smaller species are. That's the whole problem. They don't need to fight. Marcus said they need to stand together. Krath's power comes from isolation. He picks off individuals who are alone and afraid. If they learn to move in groups, to support each other, to refuse to be isolated, his tactics stop working. We show them what we did, Priya added. We form a line. We don't run. We don't fight. We just refuse to move. It's not about winning a battle. It's about making the cost of aggression too high to pay. Over the following weeks, the humans put their plan into action. They began with a mere organizing study, groups and meal schedules that kept them together. They taught them simple techniques for positioning themselves in public spaces for communicating danger, signals for knowing when to stay and when to leave. Slowly other species joined in, the Krillians still shaken by the incident during the examination, formed their own support network. Quarth, small amphibian beings who had never spoken to the humans before, approached David one morning and asked to be taught. Even a few of the larger, more capable species began participating, not because they feared Krathva personally, but because they understood the principle being established. Krathva watched these developments with growing frustration. His probation meant he could not act openly, but the students' new behavior meant he could not act covertly either. Every time he approached a potential target, that target was surrounded by friends. Every time he tried to isolate someone, they slipped away toward a group. His power was built on fear, and fear was losing its grip. 1 month after the examination incident, a situation arose that tested everything. The students had learned. A new Varak student arrived at the academy. She was younger than HFY, from a less prominent family, but she had been raised with the same beliefs about predators and prey. Her name was, and she immediately sought out Krathva as an ally. Together they began looking for weaknesses in the students' new defense network. They found one, a Mallory student named Siobhan, who had missed several group meetings due to illness. He had fallen out of sync with the schedule. One evening he found himself alone in a corridor between the library and the dining hall. Thris cornered him. Katha watched from the end of the corridor, ready to claim he was merely passing by if anyone asked. Little one, Vela said, extending her claws. You seem lost. Let me show you where you belong. Siobhan pressed himself against the wall. He was alone. He was small. He was everything the Varaks believed prey should be, but he remembered what David had taught him. He remembered what had happened in the examination hall. He remembered that fear was a choice. He took a deep breath, then he did something Velas did not expect. He screamed, not in terror, in warning, a loud, piercing call that echoed through the corridors of the academy. Doors opened. Students emerged. Within 60 seconds, the corridor was filled with beings of a dozen species, all looking at Velas with calm, determined expressions. No one attacked, no one threatened. They simply formed a wall around Siobhan and waited. Beluz looked at Krath. Krath looked at the assembled students. He saw Krellians and Quarith Malorian humans and a dozen other species standing together without fear. This is not over, Beluz snarled. Krellian student stepped forward. Her voice was steady. It is for tonight. You can try again tomorrow. We will be here tomorrow too. The Varaks retreated. Students dispersed. No violence had occurred. No rules had been broken, but something profound had changed. The final examination of the first year approached. Every student at the academy would be tested on everything they had learned. Those who passed would advance to more specialized training. Those who failed would be sent home in disgrace. The examination was designed to be difficult. It simulated a full galactic crisis requiring cooperation between species who had historical conflicts. Teams would be formed randomly, forcing students to work with beings they might never have chosen as partners. The goal was to see how they performed under pressure with unfamiliar allies. When the team assignments were announced, the academy held its breath. Marcus Priya and David had been placed on separate teams. This was deliberate. The examiners wanted to see if the humans' influence would persist without them standing shoulder to shoulder. Could they inspire others, or did their presence only matter when they were physically present? More surprisingly, Cathra had been placed on the same team as Tivin. The announcement sent waves of shock through the student body. Some believed it was a mistake, others thought it was a test designed to fail. A few cynical voices suggested the examiners were hoping for an incident that would justify expelling troublesome students. Tyan came to David that evening, trembling with fear. "I cannot do this," she said. "He will hurt me the moment we are alone in the examination room. He will hurt me." David sat with her in the garden, speaking softly. "You will not be alone. There are 8 other members of your team. The examination has observers in every room. If Craver tries anything, there will be consequences. Consequences never stopped him before. Before you had no one standing with you. Now you have friends on your team. You have skills you did not have before. You have the knowledge that fear is a choice." Tyan looked at her small hands. "I am still afraid, I know. So am I most of the time. Being brave doesn't mean being unafraid. It means doing what needs to be done despite the fear." He put a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You are stronger than you know, Tyan. We have watched you grow these past months. Trust yourself." The examination day arrived. Students gathered in the great hall for final instructions, then dispersed to their assigned rooms. The crisis scenario was revealed. A catastrophic event had destroyed a major trade route, and 3 civilizations were on the brink of war over the remaining resources. Teams had 6 hours to negotiate a solution that all parties could accept. Marcus' team began work. Immediately, he found himself partnered with species he barely knew, including a gruff Krillian engineer and a thoughtful Quarth philosopher. They had different approaches and different priorities, but Marcus helped them find common ground. He listened more than he spoke. He asked questions instead of giving orders. Slowly, the team began to function as a unit. Priya faced a different challenge. Her team included several members of species with long-standing conflicts. Old grievances surfaced immediately, threatening to derail the entire exercise. Priya used her linguistic skills not just to translate words, but to translate intentions. She helped each party understand what the others actually wanted beneath the surface of their demands. By the 3rd hour, they were working together. David's team was perhaps the easiest, filled with species he had befriended over the months. They trusted him naturally and followed gentle leadership without resistance. But David made sure to elevate others, giving quiet students chances to contribute, making sure no voice was drowned out. His team finished ahead of schedule with a comprehensive solution. But all eyes were on Tevin's team when she entered the examination room. Craver was already there. He sat in the largest chair, his massive form dominating the space. His orange eyes tracked her as she took a seat on the opposite side of the table. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. Then Krath spoke. His voice was quiet, without the usual aggression. "I have been thinking," he said. Tivin and LT Unk and GTS heart pounded. She wanted to run. Every instinct screamed danger, but she remembered David's words. She remembered what she had learned. She stayed in her Chair, about what she managed to ask. About the examination hall, about the humans who stood in front of you, about what they said, they were protecting me. Yes, but more than that, they said that every choice belongs to the one who makes it, that consequences are real, even when official punishment does not come. He paused, his claws clicking softly against the table. I have never thought about choices that way. In my culture, the strong take what they want because they can. The ability to take is the only justification needed. T-Ven remained silent, unsure where this was going, but watching the students unite against me, watching even other Varaks reject my methods, I began to see something else. Power that only comes from fear is not real power. The moment the fear ends, the power ends too. He leaned forward slightly. The humans taught this lesson without weapons, without threats. They simply stood together and refused to move. I do not fully understand it, but I cannot pretend I did not see it. One of the other team members, a young Krillian, cleared his throat nervously. What are you saying exactly? Kerr turned to face the group. I am saying that I will work with this team. I will cooperate. I will not threaten or intimidate, not because I am afraid of consequences, but because I want to understand what the humans understand. I want to see if their way has merit. The team exchanged uncertain glances. No one trusted Kraver completely. Months of fear did not disappear in a single conversation, but T-Ven surprised everyone, including herself. She stood up and extended her small hand toward the massive Varaks. Then let us work together, she said. Her voice trembled, but it did not break. Show us what you can do when you are not trying to frighten us. Krath stared at her hand for a long moment. No one moved. Then slowly, carefully, he extended one massive finger and touched her palm. It was the Varak's equivalent of shaking hands, a gesture of acknowledgement between equals. Very well, Miari, he said, let us solve this crisis together. The examination continued. Tevian's team, freed from the burden of internal conflict, attacked the problem with remarkable energy. Kranther, it turned out, had a strong understanding of military logistics and supply chains. He proposed solutions that others had not considered. Tevin's mathematical skills helped quantify the proposals. The Krillian contributed engineering expertise. Piece by piece, they built a plan. When the 6 hours ended, the teams gathered to present their solutions. One by one, they explained their approaches to the panel of examiners. Tevin's team presented last. The room was silent as they described their solution, a complex but elegant arrangement that addressed the needs of all parties while laying groundwork for long-term cooperation. When they finished, the lead examiner, an ancient being from a species so old their name had been forgotten, leaned forward. This is an unusual solution, they said. It relies heavily on trust between parties who have every reason to be suspicious of each other. Trust is difficult to build and easy to destroy. What makes you believe your solution would work? Krath stood, every student tensed, waiting for his usual display of dominance. Instead, he spoke quietly. Because trust must begin somewhere. Someone must be willing to take the first risk. My people believe that only strength matters. But I have learned that there is more than one kind of strength. The strength to stand alone with weapons is one kind. The strength to stand together without weapons is Another, he looked at Tivin. My teammate taught me this, a Malora prey. Species the smallest and most defenseless person in this room showed me what courage looks like when it has nothing but itself to rely on. He paused. Our solution requires trust. I am willing to be the first to give it. That is my answer. The examination results were announced 3 days later. Every team passed, including Tevin's, which received one of the highest scores in academy history. The examiners noted its innovative approach and what unusual level of internal cooperation, but the real result was something that could not be measured by examinations. Word spread across the galaxy about what had happened at the academy. 3 humans had arrived and changed everything. Without fighting a single battle, they had taught courage without weapons, unity without armies, strength without violence, and of Iraq's one of the galaxy's most feared predators had learned to work beside a melee as an equal. Requests began arriving from other me's, other institutions, other world species who had been bullied for generations wanted to know the secret. How had the humans done it? Could it be Todd, Marcus, Priya, and David stood in the garden on their last day at the academy, preparing to return to Earth for advanced training. Around them, students from dozens of worlds gathered to say goodbye. Tivon was there standing, taller than before. She no longer trembled when large beings passed nearby. She no longer looked to the ground to avoid attention. What will you do now? She asked David. Continue our training, then return to galactic service. There's so much work to do. The galaxy needs more humans, Typhon said. Seriously, David laughed gently. The galaxy needs more of everyone willing to stand together. Humans just helped remind people that it was possible. Crather approached, moving carefully to avoid alarming the smaller students around him. He had changed in the months since the examination hall. His posture was less aggressive,